Welcome back to another episode of Real Chumps, where chatting about movies feels like hanging out with friends. I'm your host, Marcel, and with me as always is my co-host, Danny.
This week we are discussing the 1989 film Dead Poets Society, directed by Peter Weir, screenplay by Tom Skolman, starring Robin Williams, Robert Sean Leonard, Ethan Hawke, and many more.
Schulman.
Dang it.
Perfect. Dude, 1989. This is our third movie we talk about from 1989.
What was it? Okay, we had
Batman.
and
We're doing
today. We're doing it Dead Poets Society.
And Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade. What an epic year 1989 was.
What other movies came out in 89? Now I gotta
look it up. I'm pretty sure
I'm looking it up.
This was like in the top 5 box office performance.
Okay.
Along with these other two.
Okay. Top movies from 1989. Because Back to the Future 2?
Back to the Future 2.
License to Kill? Okay.
I don't think we've had such an epic year in filmmaking as
Dude, Honey, I Shrunk the Kids?
Yeah.
Another Peter Weir, I think.
Wasn't he? Yes. You're
I
right.
think so.
Yeah, you're right.
The Wizard and The Little Mermaid.
And The Little Mermaid, yeah.
And All Dogs Go to Heaven. Wow.
Yeah, epic year, 1989.
Very. Field of Dreams. Isn't that one of yours?
That's one of my favorites of all time. That's one I wanted to do for Father's Day.
Oh, that's right.
We'll get to it.
We'll get to it. Good stuff. Bill and Ted also came out in 89.
Mm-hmm. No, 1989 was epic. It was a great year.
Wow. Okay. Well, it was a great year. Good stuff.
I'm excited to talk about this.
I am. We discussed that we want, because back to school. Many of you who are listening, if you are going to school, whatever form you might be, whether you're a teacher or a student or whatever, we just felt like it was like a good time to visit, because there's something about the teaching, the realm of school that has played a role in many films.
In many, and we even pulled a list of 7 movies, and we're like, which one should we tackle? And we're gonna get to them eventually. But it just felt, Dead Poet Society is just a classic. If you haven't seen this, if you're, I'm curious to know how Gen Z associates this movie.
For real.
If they're even aware of it, right?
Yeah.
But if you haven't seen it, I hope you do. It's a great one. I'm excited to talk about it. But question of the day for you.
Okay, give it to me.
If you could have Keating as a teacher, or Robin Williams' character from Good Will Hunting, Sean, as a teacher, who would it be? As a mentor teacher.
Yeah. It's a really hard one, because I didn't watch the film, but I watched his monologue from Good Will Hunting. Yeah. Both very, very not prophetic, but inspiring.
Yeah.
Both are to a degree about, Carpe Diem,
Yeah.
Honestly, though, I think I would, oh man, it's so hard. I'd probably go with Keating.
Okay.
And I think the reason why is because I resonate with this idea of doing something, but doing it because, doing something that is, that you do something even though it may not be the best place that you want to do it, but you do it because you have this love for what it can do.
What it can do.
For others.
Yeah.
There's something about that really, do I want to make a film one day? Absolutely. I love helping people learn how to make videos, or how to help make videos for companies or for individuals because they don't know how to, or even share knowledge when I'm working with a client, because there's something about helping them understand and see something that they haven't seen before.
Sure.
This idea of being on the table when you think you know everything, you get up and you're take a different look at something a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I like that. Yeah, I think I would also choose Keating, just because of his passion, right?
Yes.
Right. Whether it's a boring subject, if someone is passionate about it, that passion bleeds over, right?
Yeah.
Whereas Sean, he's very more direct and not as hand holding as a mentor. He definitely lets you
yeah.
He hits it, right? but he's definitely inspiring. Both are.
Yeah, I think what Robin Williams in Good Will Hunting is, he's a man who's lived an experience.
Yeah.
And he wants someone else to understand that. Whereas in this Robin Williams plays this teacher who has done that, but I think to a degree has maybe we don't know. Like we know this, we get this little line at the beginning. I think maybe we should just start talking about it. Okay, let's hold on. Let's break the breakdown. Okay, this movie is about a male boarding school
In 1959.
In 1959, where I'm like, one of those things that I was watching this movie is like, anyways, boarding school, 1959. A new professor comes in and thing. They tout the fact that in this boarding school that like not only do more and more people are graduating, but more and more people of this boarding school are going to Ivy League schools.
70% of their recent graduating class have accepted to Ivy League schools.
This new professor comes in, he takes this English class and completely like he teaches it the way he wants to teach it, not the way the administration wants him to teach. Yeah. And through this, a group of kids have come through a new wave of thought, of inspiration, and of growth, which results in a tragic event in one of the boys' lives that then goes on a witch hunt to get rid of this
professor.
This professor.
Yeah.
It's a good way. I don't know if that's...
Yeah, that's perfect.
So, if you haven't seen the movie, that's what this movie is about.
Yeah. Talk to me a little bit about your relationship with this movie. When did you watch it first? What was your impressions then? Great. How about now?
So obviously, Oh Captain, My Captain, and like the standing on the desk, and like this idea of like that trope. Obviously, people who are poets, who like poetry, know what this is from. But like, I think that this movie really solidified it in like in that time, and maybe like for a time that when people say "Oh Captain, My Captain," this leading of a leader figure, I knew of it, but I had not seen this movie until I think maybe about 5 years ago, maybe 4 years ago.
First time.
Oh, really? Sadie. So I'd heard it. I knew it was on my list, but I hadn't made it. And it's one of my Sadie's favorite movies, and so we watched it, and I mean, I freaking cried. I also was like shattered. The way that the turn of events and how some of these things the movie plays out. And I just remember being so grateful that I watched it with somebody who also cherished it, but also someone who agrees with some of this idea that like we should have thought.
Yeah.
That we should be thinkers.
Think for ourselves, right? I think that's a line that he says at some point,
right?
Yeah. That he wants them to think for themselves.
Yeah. I believe, let me see if I can pull I have it, like the line that is from Walt Whitman's, the powerful play goes on. It's by I think Life, Me, or something like that. I don't know. The powerful play goes on and you may contribute a verse. And then he poses the question is, what will your verse be?
What will your verse be?
He's talking about, the powerful play of life, right? Mm-hmm. And it just continues, and we have the ability to contribute to this verse. And it's like something happens at the very beginning, and I don't know, rewatching it this time, I'm just reminded of some of those feelings and some of those thoughts. And so I remember, just completely loving it. I was like, this is instant top 5.
Yeah.
If someone's like, just I think that's some of the feelings that I was like, I'm so grateful. Nice. I'm mad that I hadn't seen it sooner. But I'm happy that I can call it something I appreciate now.
Yeah, yeah. I think my first time exposed to this movie was in English class. And one of the professors, one of the teachers in high school, this was in high school.
Was this a lit class or is this like an English class?
English.
Okay.
Yeah. And the teacher showed us the scene of when they're outside marching and they do the Frost quote of 2 roads diverge in the woods. I took the less traveled one. That made all the difference, right? And the idea that the teacher was saying was like be an individual, right? Like don't follow trend, or not necessarily don't follow trends, but like this is the goal of my class, was what the teacher, she was saying, is for you to like have thought and individualize yourself through critical thinking. And that scene, like I was like, oh, what is this movie? Robin Williams? What? And I was just like impacted by it. And then I think eventually I saw it like my senior year in high school. I saw it again and I loved it. I was like, oh, especially in that last, I mean, the suicide scene. I was not expecting that, right?
No, it's
you don't expect it.
No, you don't. Yeah.
And then I saw it again, probably like in my mid-20s with my wife. We watched it again, loved it, and then just watched it. So I think I've only seen like 3-ish times, and then just watched it again. And I think the first time I saw it, it was just like, I definitely saw it from like the perspective of the kids, and because I was closer to their age, right?
Yeah.
I was in high school, getting ready to go to college. I think this last time, I feel so much for Keating,
Yes.
dude. Like maybe I don't know if it's because I'm an adult now and I see things differently, but I think this time I was just like, man, they did him dirty, and that's not cool. Like,
Yeah.
like, oh, that sucks. And anyway, just a lot to talk about, and I love this movie. It's a good one.
All right, where do we want to start? Because there's a lot that we can talk about here, and I think that there's so many wonderful little lessons and nuggets that we can find.
Let's start with this teacher-student relationship.
Okay. Yeah.
And talk about like his Keating's teaching methods. I love that the movie takes time to, in that first act, like those even first 20 minutes, to introduce the school, right? And they start off with the themes for this school: tradition, honor.
Yeah. I don't remember though.
Honesty. What I don't know. And they really focus on tradition.
Yeah.
Right. And then we're introduced to characters, but also I know we're going to talk about like our favorite scenes. I have like 7 different.
I know.
I don't know how I'm going to pick one.
I don't know either. I think we're just gonna have to. Yeah, I agree.
I'm just gonna have to throw a dart. But I love, and I think it stood out so much to me this last rewatch, was they go from they start with the Latin class, and they're showing how the teacher teaches Latin, and then the students are just bored, and then they go to like the chemistry class, and the teacher's talking about chemistry. Now they have this test, and then we immediately go into Keating's class.
Yeah.
Where the kids are showing up, he's not even present.
Yeah.
Right? And then like he comes in and he starts having them rip the pages. The introductory to this character of Keating, right? We just saw how the other teachers, how the Latin teacher and how the chemistry teacher teach, very much so, literally holding the book and like pointing to the whiteboard. And Keating comes here and says, let's read about PhD. I can't remember the guy, and his explanation of poetry
with a freaking graph. that was the thing that I thought was so interesting about this one, is like literally there. And when I was watching it, I remember I was watching it this time, and I was thinking, I'm like, this is interesting. Like, you know, like thinking about poetry on this like graph. And then I was reminded, because I kind of forgot about the page ripping scene. And so then he's like, all right, now rip it out. And I just thought, that is so poetic.
So poetic. And again, it and we'll talk about the critical thinking of it all, but like just to introduce the character of Keating as well.
Yeah.
He's not an old, white, balding human being with glasses, right?
Yeah.
He's younger. Yes. He brings this fresh air to the school, but not just in his appearance, but in his thinking and in his approach to education as well, right? And I think it is such a great way to introduce a character of Keating within 5 minutes, right? Of him being on screen. I even
think the first appearance we get of Robin Williams is like a wonderful like use of focal length in the sense and blocking. I mean, I can't remember what the specific terms that he uses, but he's kind of saying like, this guy is, you know, he's done a really good job and he's now going to be here and he's going to bless us with his presence.
Former student, has spent time in some prep academy in London. Now he's here,
right? And so we get this shot. It's probably a 50 mil, maybe 85 mil, but we get a row of all the other professors, and then Robin Williams at the very end, and he kind of like
just poke his head,
head
out.
There's something about that just feels so like so non-traditional.
Yeah,
I know. I think now as I'm like thinking about this, like it's just something that stood out to me just like so strongly that like, and then we go into the scene where not only he's like not present, but he's like whistling, and he has set this unorthodox tone, but the students understand that like they're gonna try to reap this benefit because they don't have this in other classes, right? So then he comes in and he's like, he walks around like he walks this introductory into this. Not only there's that, but then he takes him out, right? And he does the whole my captain. He's like, you may call me Mr. Keating, or if you I think I can't remember if he says, or if you're bold enough, you can call me, oh captain, my captain.
Yeah.
And this like laying of like the foundation of like them coming into, I think ultimately like what this movie not only about thought, but like this idea of Carpe Diem, because he has them look at the pictures and he's like,
Carpe Diem.
You know, and he's like letting them like soak in. I just think like, no, I mean, to me, I mean, like, even if you took that scene, even today, that scene would still hold.
Oh, yeah. Right. I think this is one of the central philosophies and themes of this movie, right? He's encouraging his students to, one, embrace the present moment. What are you doing today? How are you seizing the day? He invites them to take risks in their education, in their interests, in their communication, right? And for them to live their life to the fullest rather than I don't know, conforming to societal expectations.
Yeah, which I think truly is so powerful. Even like watching this today, I'm like, freak, you know, like we're in a world where so much more availability and understanding of people's lives is available to us via social media, via content of all kinds. How much I feel that there is so much conformity in the world today.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. There and I think that this movie does such a powerful job at setting up and paying off. Because I think that like, you know, you have, you know, let's talk about some of the ways that Keating challenges these traditional norms, right? Because I feel like the first act, I think really what the first act is Keating helping to instill through words, through the use of poetry, and the use of unorthodox or untraditional teaching methods. Yeah. Right? We've got the ripping of the papers. We have the leaving outside, the standing on the desks. We have the, you know, the soccer or the, you know, quoting and then like kicking a soccer ball, right? All these little things. And then I think one of, like what you said earlier, the conformity of like walking around in unison, which it's just so strong.
I love that scene. I think for years that had been like my favorite scene. I think because it was also my first introduction to this movie. Yeah. But I love Dalton's response of it all, right? He eventually has them like, everyone start walking, find your own rhythm. And Dalton decides to not walk. I'm using my right to not walk as an expression, right? Something along those lines he says. And he's like, good for you, Dalton. Way to go. Like, I love that. Like this idea of, and he points out they started walking and eventually they ended up in uniform, right? Following a rhythm, following a beat in their march. Why? And why do we do that as individuals, as society? What leads us to conform to others' expectations, ideas, behaviors, and how do we break that conformity? Yeah. And these are very important things. And we see how Keating challenges them to do that. I love the scene of later in the movie when he's talking to Perry, to Neil, and he's asking him like, why have you told your dad what you just told me?
Yeah.
Right? And Neil says no, like, of course not.
Yeah.
And he keeps telling him, no, you need to tell him that. Like, express this to him.
I love that scene as well, because, partly because, like, I think like Keating came to the same school, and maybe he had a teacher like Keating. Maybe he didn't. Maybe he needed that. But like to some degree, we know that they had this Dead Poet Society, right? They had this collection of free thinkers of something that was insightful or whatever, and that might have been like that could have just been like 15 years ago for him. You know, it's something I like to think about in this. Is it like, because he isn't old. He's not there for this, like, you know, he's this new generation. He's coming from London and perhaps was around free, you know, like he started in high school or in this boarding school and had these little bit of taste of free thinking and poetry and whatever, and then he goes over to London. Like, there's something about that little anecdote that I think is so, that then, because he then comments in that scene of the conformity of that, like, you guys all clapped for them. Yeah. You inadvertently conformed and encouraged the conformity by clapping.
By finding that rhythm, right? And
right.
Clapping for them, yeah.
And yet, he like points out each of the distinct ways that each of them walked at the beginning, right? And I think, because like I said, like earlier, is that there's something to this idea of like what we have today. And I think that many people, like individually, people collectively, there are individuals out there that are finding their own person. But at the same time, you know, like because of that, we also are being able to find our own tribes of like people that we resonate with. Right. But even with that, like, I feel like there's something to be said about, well, finding someone words that you resonate with, but how are you, there's a great book called Still Like an Artist.
Oh yeah.
By Austin Kleon. And his whole thing is like talking like that you to learn and to get better at something, you must steal, but then you give respect to those, but then you begin to ideate and remix and to change and to grow into something more. I think that this, like, we see that in like in like a fictional world with the students in this, that they find the book that was like the Dead Poets Society book, right? And I think that like not enough people get to the point where like they actually remix or try to do like take inspiration and turn it into themselves.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah.
I think for me, the scene that like impacts is when Dalton, right? The one who is that the one who says, I'm gonna choose the right to stand. Yeah. He has the saxophone.
In the cave, yeah.
In the cave. And he kind of like, you know, yeah. But then he like says some poetry and he riffs. He like personally just like feels the music a little bit. And to me, I'm like, I fully believe that in that moment, that was a moment in like life for those actors. Because it is translated so strongly in film. Like, I felt it. I don't know if you feel the same.
Yeah.
But that scene to me is such a strong scene of a shift.
In their perspectives, in how they approach art in general, right?
Yeah.
Did you know that Peter chose to film this chronologically?
Really?
Yeah.
Interesting.
So he chose to film chronologically. He was saying, one, to help like the young actors kind of understand the premise of the movie, right?
Yeah.
And to be in that tone and and have that tone of how they approach their acting. But to help them essentially find the voice of their characters from
the beginning
to the end.
That is so amazing.
And it's very hard to film chronologically, period. But he did it, for that effect. And then later also when Perry dies, he got him off the set.
Yeah, he's no longer there.
But no, like Peter didn't even tell them, didn't even give the actor the opportunity to say goodbye to the rest of the cast. He just kicked them out.
Oh.
So that it would have also that impact on the actors of he filmed his scene and he's gone. Like, you're not going to even be able to talk to him.
That's why it's so strong, that ending.
Yeah.
Look, look, what you need to understand is most films are not filmed chronologically. No. Most films, every time I think about student films, everything's almost filmed chronologically. But when you get into the business, when you get to shooting wise, you often have to, or you're dealing with other scheduling issues from other shoots or whatever. So you have to, you essentially say, okay, well, what are we going to shoot in? Or if you're doing like a huge piece, you got to shoot something in one location, you can't always lock it down when you need it. So they set up a shooting schedule and they say, okay, this time we're going to shoot in this portion, or we're going to go from there. And sometimes they end up shooting whatever the most, what might be the most crucial scenes that need to be, filmed for that sequence. They'll shoot those first because those are the ones they want to really have impactful, and then they kind of work around whatever they going from there. Yeah. And so it's really impactful to have a film shoot specifically chronologically, but only to have it be as method as this.
But going back to your point, right? That scene in the cave when Dalton's just riffing, you see that shift in the characters.
Yes.
I think it's the first time where they're actually seeing someone be an individual, right? I think prior to this, we had seen them quote some poems.
Yeah.
Amateur poems, that's fine, but they were writing their own stuff.
Yeah.
But this is Dalton. Apparently he plays a saxophone and he's goofing off. That's him. He's setting himself apart from the rest of his classmates, but then he brings it down with emotion, with passion, something that I'm assuming he's passionate about, which is his saxophone, and he's saying, "This is me, and this is how I express myself, and this is who I am."
Yeah,
right? I love that. I'm glad that you pointed that out. Going back to the cave scene, the first time they're in the cave. Okay, and I think this is going back to conformity. Let's talk a little bit about conformity and versus individualism. Okay, I forget that scene, and it's so good because they get there, and we see a tone change in them. We had seen them this whole time in the school, very formal in their behaviors, right? And this is the first time that we see them actually goofing off.
Yeah.
Right? Where they're away from the influence of I don't want to say a totalitarian school, but of this very strict school environment. And they're just,
but not only school, their family.
Their families, their parents, right? And they can be themselves, they can express themselves. Very childlike and immature, but that's fine. That's who they are at this moment.
Yeah.
And I that scene just stood out so much more to me than before because it's a very drastic tone change in the characters themselves.
It is, and I think, it's I don't know. To me, every single time we go to that initial scene, some of the things that happen is kind of sets the interesting tone for the characters as they grow throughout this film. Right? Let's talk through some of them. Okay, so we've got Neil Perry by Robert Sean Leonard. We got Todd Anderson, Ethan Hawke, Todd.
Dude.
Ethan, I forget this is Ethan Hawke just because he's so young.
Yeah. We'll get to Todd. I have lots of thoughts on Todd.
Okay, Knox Overstreet, Charlie Dalton, Richard Cameron. Where is freaking Cameron? Pitts, good old Gerard. Is that, I don't know how to say that. Stephen Meeks. Those are the boys.
Yeah,
that's the gang. The Dead Poets. Okay, where do you want to start with these guys? Because I think that everyone there's just this cast is phenomenal for them. I just think they did a phenomenal job.
Let's start with Perry, and I kind of wrote in our notes like the tragic hero's journey.
Yeah.
This is his movie, right? And we'll talk about Todd Anderson, but like, here's my question to you: how is it that? Yeah, it's a tragic story. It's a tragic journey, but why do we see him as the hero of this movie?
Oh yeah, I don't.
And maybe as a tragic hero.
Yeah. Well, okay, a Shakespearean hero.
Yeah.
Right. I think that this is a tragedy, right? I think that I think if you're a first time man, I wish we had talked to somebody who'd seen this in theaters for the first time.
Yeah.
Imagine.
I would have loved to know what their experience was watching it in theaters, like the theater experience.
Yeah.
How did the audience react to this?
Yeah, because of, I mean, that turn, I think sometimes when you get a film that talks about suicide, it is pretty apparent. Mm-hmm. It's pretty strong that someone may commit suicide.
Yeah.
Maybe not necessarily apparent, but like the lead up, the feeling of this.
They're being bullied. The parents are neglecting them. It's happening throughout the whole entire movie.
They have self-esteem issues. There's like a perspective. Like there's tons of there's other films that I can't think of off the top of my head. There's one or two that I think of that have this, mm-hmm. but this might happen.
Yeah.
Obviously, every single time a suicide ever happens in a film, I always feel it
hits.
Like it just hits. It's just very strong. Anyways, you would say you had something?
You bring up what you describe is how I see Todd Anderson, Ethan Hawke's character.
Okay.
Which I think stood out to me this time. I feel like it's subverting expectations. If anyone traditionally, like you just laid out, were to commit suicide, it should have been Anderson's character.
Yeah.
Right? His parents forget the fact that they gave him the same gift. He has this legacy that he has to live up to from his brother, right? The guy is afraid. He's so quiet and his self-esteem is so low of what he thinks of himself. He writes poetry, but keeps it hidden from everyone.
Yeah.
He lacks this confidence. If anyone traditionally in a movie should have committed suicide, it should have been Anderson's character.
And Perry would have been the one that would have been impacted.
He's engaging. He's so outgoing. He's kind of like the leader of this group of friends.
Yeah. He is. I mean, he's the one that says we should do.
Yeah.
He's the first one to come down to Robin Williams' level when he shows him the book of himself. Yeah. Like he comes down. This is the thing that I just think is so interesting about blocking. Okay, in this film, Robin Williams gets this book, and he kind of comes down. He sits. He perches himself, right?
Yeah.
And Perry follows suit. Yet all the other young men stay standing. Yet there's this question of well, what do we got to do? What can we do this thing? Perry, and Williams continues talking and sharing it causes some ruffle, but him reiterating some of the teachings that he's shared with the boys,
yeah,
and them coming down to his level to try to come to him to the same situation. That to me was another impactful scene in the sense of it's not conformity, but of seeking something that challenges an idea, right? In the sense that why would he sit down? Why is he crouching down? But having this idea to lean into something to find out, to discover, right? And Perry's, because you're 100% that scene of the desk thing, is also so strong.
Yeah, and you feel, and again, I love the dynamic between the two characters, right? You have Perry who comes and says oh, well, It's got this great aerodynamic feel to it. Like, maybe we should test it out, right? And for Anderson, and he helps throughout the entire movie. He's helping Anderson find his voice and who he is, and come out of his shell.
Yet he's the one that is trying to find his voice.
Yeah.
Against his father.
Mm-hmm. Against his father, against his father's expectations, right? You're going to grow up to be a doctor.
Man, I'm really glad you brought this up because I didn't think about this, but that's really what he's 100% helping because he like says, don't just come. You're going to take minutes. Anderson's going to take minutes since he's not going to read. Yet then what are you going to do? You got to like, teasing him by taking the paper of the poem, right? But I think to a degree, like Keating also is trying to help Anderson because he understands. I think he resonates with Anderson.
Yeah, and I love the scene where he's like, you bring your own poem by Monday, and you're gonna read it out loud. And Anderson, I know how how scary this is for you.
Yeah.
Right? I love that he just says that as he's walking out of the classroom.
The fact he's like, while people are still standing on the table.
And then that scene later when he helps Todd, almost like freestyle a poem, right? Yeah. I want to talk about that scene, and I want your thoughts on the camera work in that scene. Okay. Right? He invites him to look at the picture of the
Walt woman.
Oh, yes, that's who it was. Right, and helps him. What do you see? And don't think about it. Just spit it out. Right? Yeah. At that point, the camera is standing, and we're seeing them side to side.
Yeah.
And then as he continues to engage him. And what else? The blanket, right? And you hear the classroom laugh. Ignore them. Okay, focus on. Well, tell me more about this blanket. Yes. And then that's when the camera starts panning around them.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And not only is the camera panning around them, but they themselves are also moving around in a circle. And he's holding him, and he's continuing to encourage him to talk more about this blanket, how it never covers your feet, and you feel like cold, and et cetera, et cetera. Beautiful writing, by the way.
Oh, and incredibly delivered.
Yeah, well delivered, and incredibly filmed, captured as well.
What stood out to you for you? What was the thing that you like? Like, what do you have a specific technical question, or do you just like what is it just that you want?
I think what stood out to me is one, why this choice to film it like that. Because for me, every time it's a beautiful, calm, emotional poem that he's writing, right? And again, he's putting him on the spot. I think for me, I'm not a filmmaker, but I think as an amateur filmmaker like myself or another filmmaker would have probably taken that scene and just kind of quietly let us sit in those emotions. And maybe I probably would have just started with a low angle shot and maybe like slowly zoom into him and feel these two characters just interacting, right?
Okay. I love it. I love that your perspective.
I think maybe that's how I would have done it. Mm-hmm. Whereas this feels almost not chaotic, but like there's this feeling of a rush, right? Of going around in a circle and capturing them. And then he delivers that final line and he just says, right, like, remember this.
Yeah.
Right? And then and I love the choreography of Robin Williams stepping back, kneeling, holding his chest and just kind of giving him like a thumbs up, right? And he says, remember this.
Yeah.
Why film it in such a untraditional, and I think maybe that I just answered my question. Why film it in such an untraditional way?
See, that could be it. It's like to be untraditional, but I think the also aspect of it is that much of this film is pretty locked off.
Yeah.
There's not a lot of moving shots. Mm-hmm. They're either locked off, they're like pannings at some winds and whatever. This is the only time in the film that there's like heavy movement. And I don't know Peter Weir or not Peter. Yeah, Peter Weir? Yeah.
Yeah, the director.
Okay. Yeah. I don't know what the whole breakdown, but he's intentionally providing motion But the motion, you said it perfectly, is that this, if you had shot this, you would have maybe low angle, which mean and zooming, moving up into this like speech, maybe a couple cutaways to like the people, like some of the people laughing, but then like a quick cut back to a close up or something, right? I think what I love about this is that we are the feeling of a spiral of a we now would consider this as like a Michael Bay feel, but like this spiraling around and following the thing is jarring. It's a little it causes some feeling of tension in this action, right? And so I think that he's trying to deliver what Anderson is feeling for us, but at the same time providing this, you know, like in a sense he's subjectively helping us understand Anderson, but at the same time subverting our like making us feel that this is somebody that we need to be cautious of, that we need to be paying attention to, and see what his like this arc is going to become, because he's always the one that gets like is like, you know, is put off and is kind of like going from, you know, like a little bit on the background in a lot of cases, yet he's the one that we end up feeling we see some of the most strong reactions after the death of Perry, right? But I think part of it is this sleight of hand in film, in camera work, but also us to understand the character better.
I like that. I like how you mentioned like we're feeling that jarring or that even like uncomfortableness within Anderson, right?
Well, I mean, you have Robin Williams like literally right there, and he's like, I think what I love about it is that like we're feeling Anderson, but also Robin Williams trying to help him barbarian yelp.
Yeah.
Reach to his, like reaching into himself that no one's ever asked him to. And sometimes that takes that, like, I mean, they're you know, like they were snickering and whatever. He's like, don't listen to them.
Yeah.
But that camera then locks in and does this. I really don't know. I'm like, I did think about like how it was shot.
Yeah.
Because there's not, I have to rewatch it, but I don't think there's a cut. And if there is, it's not noticeable, and it's just good editing.
Yeah.
Right, but like there's movement and like closing in and whatever. I even would say like we get a little bit what you had said, right? We begin with a wide, less interested. We come up close. We're intimate. We're like feeling these feelings, and then all of a sudden we have a switch as he soars with words, with expressing things that is just beautiful.
Yeah.
It's understanding, like it's him expressing things. And even again, the poem that he uses, this idea of a blanket only covering your face and not being able to like escape from that.
Yeah.
That it'll never satisfy. Freaking note to yourself, like suicide note if you want. I'm like, is this guy like, you know, is he feeling trapped, right? You know, what is he feeling? But also it's a high on him and a low on Robin.
Yeah, you're right.
Okay, so Rob Williams is like what's the word, become submissive to this youth who's trying to speak, and again he's like protecting himself, but also like showing acceptance to this sort of thing, right? And again, I don't know, it's just a beautiful sometimes I think what we talk often about in this is that we need to feel. This movie is freaking like a freaking 2-hour long movie of feelings. Okay.
Yeah.
But I think that in this end, the camera work took us in to make us feel. I think the same thing happens with the suicide.
Yeah.
Right? Like we're, you know, it's, you know, there's the darkness, there's the him getting into his puck outfit, right?
Mm-hmm.
These little things that like less camera work, but more of a blocking and sense of direction for an actor to perform this feat, right? That again just adds to making us feel.
Yeah.
But we're using the language of film to help us do that. Whereas sometimes when we talk about it, it's like just like pause stuff. Don't like go crazy. Don't add like all the special effects and stuff.
Yeah.
Like, but sometimes like use the tools you have to be able to help make the point.
Mm-hmm.
And I think this is a wonderful film to do that.
To do that with.
Oh man, so many good stuff.
So many good stuff. I know
we could probably talk for hours.
We could talk for a while for this. Before we come to a close, I want to ask you this. Okay, this is not in our show notes, so you have no idea. Do you have a teacher?
Oh yes,
a Keating type that helped you find your individualism, that helped you kind of like gave you this influence, right? To be kind of to be who you are, right?
Yeah.
Since we're doing this episode, with
our teachers,
do you have one?
I have two.
Okay.
There was a Mr. Jones in my junior high. He was a math professor. And he was a big dude. And I was also a fluffy kid. But also, he cared for every single one of his students. He would he knew if you were having a bad day.
Yeah.
Right? And there was a class where I'm a loud and obnoxious. Sometimes I was loud and obnoxious there. I'm probably still loud, maybe still obnoxious. But somehow we got in this thing where I always loved cookies. I love cookies. I love Oreo cookies.
Yeah.
But also whatever. We had this one class and we decided that May 14th was the day we celebrate cookies, and we just we just always eat cookies and talk about stories and just talk about. And he gave us some whatever. And I eventually went back because he was so influential on me that I was finishing up my schooling. I took a specialty course that was we're divided into teams. So most of them did short films. I was part of a documentary group, but I fractured my ankle, so I couldn't go out and get other B-roll. So all we did was got interviews. But I was becoming a father, and I initially wanted to do a little bit more of me and a couple other people share thoughts of becoming a father, but then have sound bites from other people being fathers and some insights, whatever. But he gave advice. He said, he was he said to me, he's look, some days you drive home, because he'd drive an hour to get to school, to the work. And you drive home and you walk in and the dishes aren't done and there's stuff on the floor and whatever. And you've had a long day or whatever. And, that's okay.
That's okay.
And so that to me, that was just again, just another note of not only of acceptance of oneself. The second person was and I don't know if you'll listen to this, but was my professor in college, was Drew Tyler, and part of it was just that he believed in me as an individual. And when I applied to be the executive producer over the studio team, I didn't feel like I was fully capable, but he gave me that thing, and I did stuff. I was oh, I'm actually helping putting stuff together and being a leader in a sense that not that I hadn't been before, but no one accepted. Not that I didn't feel accepted, but he gave me the opportunity to lead, and that really made me feel confident in what I was doing in my career path. Because
cool.
Who goes into filming and actually makes it a living? Yeah. I don't know. You?
I have 4 teachers that just changed my life.
Yeah.
Miss Clegg, she was my second grade teacher. She was my first teacher when we first moved to the States.
Yeah.
And she just took me in and
helped you.
Helped me. I don't know if, this was mid 90s. Like, I don't know if like she hadn't had experience with like immigrant kids, right? And so like, but she like showed so much love and support, and like she like took me by the hand literally and metaphorically, and just like helped me in school so much. But in junior high school, I remember my sophomore English teacher. And this is a teacher that for the life of me, I can't remember her name, man.
Oh, that's the worst.
And like the last 10, like I'd say the last 8-10 years, I've been trying to like remember.
Do you have a yearbook?
Going back to not conforming to societal expectations. I was that kid who was like, why do I need a yearbook? I look at this thing for a week and then I just throw it away. I did not get a yearbook. I got it my senior year.
That makes sense. I mean, I get that.
And so I was like, yeah, I'll get one my senior year. But like the rest of the other years, I'm walking down the halls the last week of school and everyone's signing things. I'm like, I have the names and the phone numbers of the people I want to hang out with. I don't need to spend my time walking around the halls.
This is why you're a classier man than I am. I was 100% all for yearbooks.
Okay.
But part of it is because I think my mom was but now as an adult, I'm like, it's funny that you said this because like we were like, should we get our girls yearbooks? And I'm like, why? Like,
yeah.
Just why? But randomly, I got a text message from one of my friends from college. He said that I was in his wife's second grade class.
Oh, okay.
So there's that.
But she was awesome in the sense that like, look, we live in a fairly conservative area. Yeah. And she talked about her time as a hippie in like in the 60s. And if you could imagine Miss Frizzle from Magic School Bus,
yeah,
in like real life,
okay,
this is her. She was older lady, brunette, just frizzly hair, wore mismatched clothes on purpose, but like very hippie-ish, and like she was just the coolest teacher. And like she was, I think she was the one that actually showed us that clip.
Okay.
Which I think this is why I have such a love for this movie and that scene, and for her. But she always was encouraging to like look at things in a different perspective. Everything. We would hold like debates in class. Yeah. This was the era when everyone was reading Twilight.
Oh, okay? Yes. Okay.
In high school, and I had lost a bet, and I ended up reading Love Story, which later was made into a movie, which won a couple Oscars.
The zombie one?
No, just Love. The book's called Love Story.
Oh, okay.
It's a movie that came out. The book came out in the 60s.
Oh, yeah, okay.
And then like 2 years later, it was such a hit, they made a movie and it won several Oscars. And I was reading this and she saw me. I remember very vividly, like everyone reading Twilight, like all the girls. And then she was walking by and she's like, "You're reading Love Story?" I'm like, "Yeah." She's like, "This is a great movie from the 60s. I was young." And like she goes into the book and the movie, and like she was like, "I like that you're not reading Twilight and you're reading a real like romantic novel." I'm like, "Okay."
Don't come at us, okay?
If you don't know, I'm reading it because I lost the bet. But anyways, so she was just awesome in that perspective.
Yeah.
And then my second teacher is Miss Green, my junior English teacher. I think my love for analyzing cinema comes from her.
Okay.
This was the year where we read Great Gatsby. We read The Crucible.
Yep.
And every time we would read it,
did you read Dorian Gray at that time? Was that the class?
I read Dorian Gray like in junior high.
I couldn't get past Dorian Gray.
I love Dorian Gray. But we read some of these great literature classics, and we would watch the movie.
Okay.
Not with the intent of like killing time, like a lot of teachers would, but like it was always to encourage us to like, why is this being depicted this way in the movie versus how it was depicted in the book?
Okay.
Even like The Great Gatsby, we watched 2 versions of Great Gatsby.
Oh.
And like she would always like ask us like the questions like, why was it depicted in the book this way, in the Robert Redford movie this other way, and in this other movie this way?
Yeah.
Right. And I think, I don't know, she definitely like instilled that like analyze things,
Asking questions,
and look at things in a different perspective. Listeners, like, let us know. Like,
yeah, tell us in the comments.
Tell us in the comments. Tag them if you follow them. I think well, look, I'm not very active on social media, but I'm pretty sure Miss Green and I are connected on Instagram. I'll tag her.
Yeah.
Great lady. Great lady. She's like, I feel like she's not my age, but
she's just in age.
she was that cool teacher also, because I think she had just graduated. She had just graduated college, and like
something about that fresh. You're not tainted.
She has that fresh look, and like she's not tainted. Some teachers, man, they're just. I feel bad.
I'm not. Like. Yeah, we could.
Look, hopefully you thank you for like letting us rant on this, listeners. Yeah. I just kind of wanted to ask that. Any last thoughts on the enduring legacy of Dead Poet Society?
I think that is what will be your verse. I think I'm gonna be thinking about that for the next little bit, and if you haven't carpe diem your life. It's so funny that this is the case. In high school, this is a little anecdote. I had this group of friends, and they're like, Carpe Diem! And I think this is because they probably watched Dead Poet Society.
Yeah. I know my buddies and I every now and then would throw that phrase around.
Yeah, just this idea of like, you need to freaking seize the day. And it's funny that this is the case, because I think that I don't think I realized how much of an impact this idea of Carpe Diem, like just literally, like I had this huge flashback just now of like these little moments in high school that like we yelled this thing of like, Carpe Diem, and then thinking about my life and like how much of that has been impacted because I took one day, and that one day I decided to Carpe Diem.
Yeah. Look, me reaching out to you to do this,
that's
it took me a while to seize the day, but
can we talk about that for a second?
Yeah.
What was it like for you coming to me on that day and getting the response? Because do you want to talk about what happened?
Sure. Yeah. Look, a little bit of background.
Is this the 25th episode? This is the 26th episode.
I think this will be 27th, maybe.
Oh, sorry. I'll cut
26, yeah.
Okay.
We could release it as a 25th, though. I had had this thought of like doing the podcast for the last decade. And I think in the last decade I had asked like 3, maybe 4 people, like, hey, I have this idea of a podcast. I have like this format. Do you want to do it? And at one, I had asked individuals who like I feel like we had good chemistry, right? And so they all said, "Oh, sounds cool," but like, no. I'm pretty sure 2 were like, "Oh yeah, let me think about it. I'll get back to you." And then like a month goes by.
You never saw them again.
It's and I'm still friends with all of them. But like I just never like, I don't know. It just wasn't working out. And then you and I, before COVID, we had done dinner together.
Yeah,
you talked about like what you do for a living and like your passion for films. COVID hit, and then like we just
didn't talk to each other.
We didn't talk to each other.
We tried. I remember I saw Marco Polo once. I was like, oh, I did try to talk to Marcel. Like,
oh, it's probably still.
It's still there.
It's still there. Oh, whoops.
No, it's okay.
And we played Halo a handful of times.
Yeah, we did
during COVID.
When they were trying to make a comeback.
Yeah. But then and then so I think I started the year by like what do I want to do this year differently? Like I'm in my 30s. Okay, like I feel like I should be like. I've developed like the hobbies that I like. I love cycling. I do that often. But I just wanted to see like where are my like hobbies? And then the podcast has been sitting there. This format has been sitting in my desktop for like a decade. I'm like, Danny. And so then I approached you that Sunday.
Okay.
In church.
Can you please talk about you approached me? Enter day. Interior Sunday school or church gym,
church building.
Marcel walks up to Daniel. He sits
down and says, "Hey man, I have this idea.
Whatever it is, yes,
for a podcast. Would you? Whatever it is, I didn't even finish the sentence.
Finish that sentence.
Would you?" And you're just like, "Yeah." whatever it is, let's do it. And I'm like, okay, I've had this idea. And like, I tried to explain, you're like, no, yeah, 100%, let's do it. And then I was like, okay, he's obviously interested. I have not had this reaction or response in the last decade. I'm gonna continue to follow this thread.
Marcel, you literally, I don't like you. It was so. I think about that moment so much because like you were so like no, like just hold on.
Let me explain what I'm asking you to do and what are you willing to commit to this? And you're like, yeah, no, whatever, man. Let's do it.
Yeah. 26 episodes later.
Here we are.
Here we are.
Yeah. So, but I'm pretty sure that I had thought of like, you know what? I just gotta seize this, and I'm gonna ask another person, see if they'll do it. And yeah, we do this as like a side thing, but like, yeah, I wanted to just do it. I don't want to. I want this podcast to be a verse in my life.
The reason why I wanted to have this conversation is because I do think if you are somebody who, when you think about the things that happen in your life, I bet you 80% of the time it's because you carpe diemed.
You carpe diem.
You freaking seized the day. You said, not today, I'm doing this.
Yeah.
Or, you know what? I don't love this job. I'm going to do what I want to do.
Yeah.
I want to find what I'm passionate about. Not what I don't want to do what I love. I want to find what I love to do.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right? So
this is the impact. This is the legacy that I think this movie has.
Yeah.
And you talked about like the phrase Carpe Diem. I think "Oh Captain, My Captain," right? That was used so much during Robin Williams's death in headlines, right? In tributes to him. Like, this is the impact of this movie.
But there's two parts to it. Someone must become the captain.
Yeah.
And others must learn to seize. Right? Maybe you're the one that's going to be the captain and you're going to seize the opportunity to lead others, to help them. Maybe you're going to just do something that you're like, I want to do this, and there's nothing else that, like, I don't care if someone says no. If after asking 50 people, I'm going to start my own podcast, whatever it might be. The thing is that you will be surprised on the people who will come and sign that note to say, I'm here with you.
Yeah. Everyone needs a pair in their life.
Yeah.
To encourage them and commit. Yeah.
So, guys, listeners, we've been doing this for 26 weeks now. We want to thank you for those who are listening, and we're nowhere near slowing down. We have big hopes for this. More importantly, just because we believe that we're providing a great opportunity for you to come listen and come chat with us. So please, wherever you're listening to or watching this podcast, consider following us, consider subscribing, consider, more importantly than either of those two, I don't care if you don't even do any of those things, but I do care if you comment and tell us who your favorite teacher was in the comments down below, or when you're leaving a review on like why this podcast was great, why this episode was great, and that you wanted to share with other listeners who that amazing teacher that helped you become the person you are today.
Yeah, and tell us what you think about this movie. Have you seen it? Was this your first time? Like, what little tidbits about this movie stand out to you, or stood out to you back then, stand out to you now? What is it? We want to hear from you. You can always connect with us on Twitter, YouTube, Threads, wherever you... Did I say YouTube? I did say YouTube. Wherever we're at, or email us via email at your@realchums.com. Join us next week. Next week, we're doing a unique episode. We're going to be talking about the state of the movie theater experience, or the summer blockbusters.
Summer blockbusters. Yeah, that's what we're talking about, and I'm excited about it because it's gonna be. I think it's a conversation that needs to be had.
Yeah,
and we have thoughts.
Lots of thoughts. We'll see you guys.